this.
Hi everyone, welcome to another live stream by Snap Language. I already said hello to Talon and Sylvia. It's always good to see some old faces here, people that have been here before. And if you're new, welcome. This is what is it? Our fourth live stream on language learning. And today we'll be talking about some of the best ways to learn, some of the problems that people run into. And hi, Sylvia. We'll talk about some pitfalls and myths. I want to get right into it. I don't want to delay this. There's a lot to talk about today. I'll try to make it as short as possible. Channel is still doing really well. I just wanted to remind you about the membership program that we have now. We just started taking in members. So when you become a channel member, you have some perks. There are different tiers. Depending on the tier, you will get different perks. This is somewhat new, and first I was thinking, maybe I'll have one or two people sign up. But actually, I'm getting a lot of people signing up, relatively speaking, so I'm really happy about that. And I think that's it for channel updates. There's not a whole lot going on. YouTube kind of slows down a little bit in the summer. Not me. I'm planning a lot of things. This is not really a channel update, but I have a second channel that's exclusively for ESL. I didn't do a lot for a while because I was getting Snap Language where I wanted it to be, but now I'm starting to post videos there. I posted one this past week, and it actually did pretty well. A lot of people have been watching that video. It is about ESL. If you're interested, look up Snap Language Learner. Snap Language Learner. There will be a lot going on that channel, and of course I will continue posting videos to Snap Language, having live streams and so forth. I guess that's it. Roxana, greetings. Happy Saturday to you too. Roxana is one of my first channel members. Salam Autopilot, good to see you again. Well, it's always nice to see some return customers. It's always a good sign. Thank you so much for coming back. So let's get into it. Let me switch gears here. Okay, so we're talking about the best way to learn a language. Then I have colons there saying avoiding pitfalls and myths. So we're actually going to be focusing a lot on avoiding these pitfalls and myths. And it'll make more sense why I want to talk about avoiding pitfalls and myths before I even talk about ways to learn a second language. So what are we doing today? So we'll learn about pitfalls in your second language learning. We'll dispel common myths around second language learning. There are many of those. Actually, I was really surprised. For the last 3 weeks or so, I've been Googling and searching videos on YouTube a lot about language learning. In particular, ESL. There are a lot of channels on YouTube for ESL, but you also have a lot of channels for German, French, and just all major languages, and even some not so common languages. And there are a lot of things that I see there that I go, oh no. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I think it has a lot to do with myths, things that people believe about second language learning that just keeps, people just keep passing on these ideas that may not be so good. And my measure of an idea that's just a myth is when it's not research-based. There's no research supporting certain claims about second language learning, but people believe them, and they just keep perpetuating those beliefs. And then we'll discuss how you can assess second language strategies that work for you. Again, I'll be repeating this in every session. What we're not doing today, I have no snake oil for you, no quick fixes, no one size fits all solutions. Actually, it's interesting in a comment that I saw on my other channel. I had a video about how to learn vocabulary, and somebody wrote a comment about that video saying that it was something like the commenter expected more out of the video. So I asked him, what did you expect? And essentially, he expected me to tell him exactly how to do it. This is how you do it, and if you do this, your English will be perfect. You will learn vocabulary perfectly in 10 days. You can't do that. Roxana, thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Oh yeah, speaking of that, thanks for the reminder, Roxana. If you want to help the channel and help me continue making videos, do what Roxana just did. She sent me a super chat. That is a way for you to just kind of like tip me. You're showing your appreciation for what I'm trying to do here, and you're sending me a super chat. Thank you so much, Roxana. I really appreciate it. So again, some quick definitions for that we will be using in this live stream is L1 is your native language, the language that you call your mother tongue, your mother language. L2 is whatever other language you're learning. It doesn't have to be your second language. It's whatever other language you're learning. Some people prefer to call it target language. Sometimes I call it target language because it's more, it's whatever you're trying to learn at the time. And always keep in mind that your learning context makes a big difference. So are you learning English at home, for example, where English is not spoken? So that would be English as a foreign language. Or are you living in the United States learning English here? So that would be English as a second language. Sometimes that distinction doesn't really make that much of a difference. Sometimes it does. Okay, because if you're living in the country where the language is spoken, you have more access to materials, and people just go out the door and you can speak the language. Just to recap, remember that we talked about your motivations, attitudes, and goals. So what are your reasons for learning your target language? If you're learning French right now, why did you decide to learn French? Maybe your grandparents were French, and so it's a heritage language. You want to learn it. Do you have the right attitudes? Do you have a positive or a negative attitude towards learning your target language? And what are your goals for learning your target language? We spent some time last week or the week before, last week, talking about setting goals, right? I hope if you were here last week, I hope you gave it some thought about what you want to do, not just in general terms about the language, but right now. Okay, if you're here, if you're watching this live stream, you're interested in learning a language, whether it's English or French or German or whatever. So what are your goals for your target language? If you haven't been here, go back, rewatch or watch those videos, and it'll make more sense, because it makes a difference if you why you're learning a language, the attitudes you have towards learning, and why you want to learn that language. Okay, so these are just a quick recap. Hello, Katie Denson from Albuquerque. Katie has been here quite a few times too. Thank you so much for showing up, Katie. All right, so before we even go to what's the best way, give me the quick solution, which I will not give you. Let's talk about some of these pitfalls and myths. So you spend a lot of time thinking about your motivation, making a decision to learn a language, why you want to learn the language, and how you're going to go about it. You change your schedule around, you talk to your family, so you make arrangements. create a study schedule, go out, get materials, and wonderful, you're ready to start learning a language, and then sometimes everything kind of falls apart, okay? Well, let's talk about these pitfalls, things that can happen that can throw a wrench into all your plans. One category of pitfalls are self-inflicted pitfalls. We like to blame other people and outside forces for our shortcomings, but sometimes we just do it to ourselves. How can you cause yourself to fail? And I'm sure everybody here has had, a chance to cause yourself to fail. You did something that in hindsight, when you look back, you go, that was my fault. If I had done something differently, not just about language learning, but just anything that we do. Sometimes we look back and we go, well, I didn't make the right decisions. Okay, what are some of the things that for you that you can think of right now that perhaps you get in your own way? We talked about thinking through your goals, right? So that could be a pitfall. Okay, you had all these great goals, but you didn't really think through each one of them to make sure that they were realistic. You had great plans, you had good intentions, but you started taking shortcuts. Okay, maybe you were not willing to put in the hard work, and you started doing things kind of like halfway there, but not really, and just skipping through steps. Not scheduling your learning time. Okay. And this, for me, speaking for myself, sometimes I have to stop and create a schedule for myself. Since I started working on this channel, full time this year because of COVID and all that, I really had to sit down several times and say, okay, so Mondays I'll do this, Wednesdays I'll do this, in the morning I'll do this. Perk is saying, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. I'm sorry, let me correct this right quick here. Apologize for that. Just talk amongst yourselves. When I set up the software that I use to stream the image to you, there are so many things I have to do that it's sometimes I just leave something out, and I left something very important out, the chat. So Perk said, I make a schedule that's too ambitious, and then I give up and I can't stick to it. Last week we talked about those New Year's resolutions, right? You're so excited about starting something new. Oh, I'm going to do all this stuff. And then even if you make a schedule, it's just too much. It's unrealistic. It's overly ambitious. And, it was kind of your fault, right? You can't blame anyone. Okay, so these are some of the pitfalls. Not responding well to unexpected changes. Okay, remember last week we said that part of planning is to try to plan for possible changes, possible difficulties you may have, and be ready. Just be ready to make changes. Not being very clear about your goals. Oh, I want to learn French, but for what? For what reason? What timeline do you want to have? You want to learn French, meaning read, write, speak. You want to travel, be able to speak perfect. What exactly are your goals? Okay. Also, focusing on or obsessing about unimportant things. That's actually one of the sort of myths around second language learning, that you have to speak perfectly. Okay. Your pronunciation is really important. You have to have perfect pronunciation. And so you start focusing so much on that, or grammar or something. You pick something about the language that for whatever reason you think that's the most important part of learning the language, and you focus so much on that part that you forget everything else. People really obsess over vocabulary. My experience with my students, whenever I ask them, what do you want to accomplish this semester, at the beginning of the semester, oh, vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. So they end up focusing so much on vocabulary that they forget other things. But it's not all your fault, right? Sometimes there are external forces at play that may interfere with your language learning. For example, marketing ploys. A lot of times they are unscrupulous marketing ploys. They're trying to get your money, and they will promise, a lot of things. And, if you buy our course, you will be able to speak in, 3 months and blah, blah, blah. And after they take your money, you're not going to see any results. You kind of have to be a little smart, but sometimes, you did not know that you were falling for, some unscrupulous ploy. Materials and instructors. Okay, if you start learning a language, maybe you're lucky, you join a course, and you have a great instructor, but sometimes you don't. Okay, and especially if you're just beginning to learn, if you get a really bad materials and a bad instructor, it leaves a really bitter taste in your mouth. You may end up giving up. Okay. It wasn't really your fault. It's just, maybe, unfortunately, you didn't have the right, you didn't have a good start because of the materials and instructors in the course that you picked. Using professional language learners as role models. Again, I was saying that, I've been going to YouTube a lot and looking at all these different people giving advice about language learning. A lot of them are professional language learners. Okay, that's pretty much all they do. It seems that I speak 5 languages and this is how I did it, and you can do it too, and they're trying to motivate you. So they become role models for people that I want to be able to learn just like this person. But is number one, do you want to be a polyglot? Do you want to speak 10 languages? Maybe that's not really your goal. So why are you using these professional language learners as a role model? Many of them, I admire them. I really do. I admire a lot of these language learners, professional language learners, polyglots, because, man, they speak like 7, 9, 10 different languages really well. But then if you dig deeper and you look at some of their videos where they explain what they have to do, that's pretty much all they do. Okay, they wake up early in the morning, they start with 30 minutes of Chinese, and then they move on to 30 minutes of Russian, and then they do this, and then they do listening. I mean, they spend the whole day just learning multiple languages. Is that something that you want to do? Like I said, I admire these people, but I go, I don't want to do that. I think that what they're doing is great for them, but I don't want to be like that. So if someone uses, these professional language learners as a role model, you may become very frustrated when you realize that you can't do it. And then you start blaming yourself, I'm a loser. No, they can do it, but I can't. Well, you're not the same people. And misconceptions about language learning. Sometimes people will teach you some misconceptions about language learning, which leads us to these myths. And I love this picture. When I found this picture online, it's like, I can teach you languages. I can teach you many languages. This mystical thing. Okay, be careful of these language learning myths. Some are kind of dumb, they're kind of silly, but some myths can be damaging. They can make you give up on learning a language even, or go about it the wrong way, and not have the results that you want. And sometimes telling myths and good information apart is not easy. Not everybody knows. Not everybody is a linguist. Okay, not everybody knows a lot about language acquisition and second language. Even linguists sometimes don't know enough about second language acquisition. They know about their field, but not second language acquisition. So they might not, even a linguist might not know if something is true or not. That's why you have to do your own research, right? You have to get online and look for good sources of information to verify if something is a myth. But the truth is that many times you hear something, you believe it's true, and you don't even think about taking the time to verify the information. But if you're serious about your language learning endeavors, take it seriously and do some research. Here's one of the myths: unless you learn a second language as a child. Unless you learn a language as a child, you can never be fluent. What do you think? Is that true? Unless you learn a second language as a child, you can never be fluent. Oh, Ellison, what do you mean that one hurts? That hurts because you think it's true, or that hurts because it's terribly wrong? Okay, it's neither right nor wrong. Okay, it depends on how you define fluency. Okay, when people say, "Oh, if you don't learn it as a child, you'll never be fluent in the language," well, people just throw words like fluency, but they don't really know exactly what they mean. Okay, stop being demotivated by that, because it doesn't matter. Okay, can you become fluent? Like, let's say you start learning a language when you're 40. Can you become fluent in that language? Yes, you can become fluent. Will you have an accent? Probably. Okay. The big difference between learning a language as an adult and as a child is that as a child, your brain is still, growing and changing. So you're ready to learn language. You're ready to pick up sounds. Okay, so you hear sounds from different languages, and children can hear the sound and create that sound much more easily than an adult can. Okay, so if you start learning a language as a child, maybe you won't. I mean, if you don't learn a language, if you start learning a language as an adult, you will have an accent. So it doesn't mean you can't learn the language and be fluent and communicate, right? Some people say, "Oh, but for children, it's so easy. You just drop them off in a new country, and within a month, they're talking." What are they talking about? They're talking about what children talk about: toys. I'm hungry. Do this. Okay, they pick up the language fairly quickly because that's all they have to do. They don't have a job. They don't have responsibilities. So they're just, and again, their brains are fresh and ready to learn languages. Okay, but it takes children years and years and years to learn a language really well. As an adult, if you're a 40-year-old adult and you start learning, say, Spanish, okay, you will have a much deeper understanding of Spanish than a child would within the same amount of time. Maybe you would have an accent and that child would be able to just reproduce those sounds more easily, but so what? Okay, so Ellison, forget it. Okay, it doesn't matter how old you are. Fluency, you can develop, adequate fluency in a language, or even really good fluency with practice. You may have an accent if you learn it as an adult. So what? As long as you can communicate, you can read, you can do things with a language, that the things that you want to do, great, you know. So stop letting people demotivate you. Stop letting people make you feel like, you know, oh, I missed the boat. No, you didn't miss the boat. You know, you can start learning a language when you're 80. The only way to learn a second language is living where the language is spoken. Okay, let me see. Perk has an interesting comment here. So there was a show on NPR recently, and the lady said she dropped out of learning Mandarin because she had heard about the critical period hypothesis. Yeah, the critical period hypothesis says just that, you know, after a certain age, your brain is set on your native language, or, you know, if you're bilingual or multilingual, those are the languages that are kind of in your brain now. Your brain is good at those languages. But it doesn't mean that you can never learn a fourth, fifth, sixth language. You can continue learning languages, you know, indefinitely. Like I said, you can be 80, 90 years old and start learning a new language. Older brains still have something called plasticity. Plasticity means that your brain is able to adjust, to change, to learn new things. Children's brains are have a lot of plasticity. Okay, because that's what they're doing. They're just creating connections and changing as children learn. But as an adult, you still have enough plasticity to create connections. Otherwise, you know, I wouldn't be learning anything. Ugh, how terrible. Now I know how Ellison feels. I can't learn anything anymore because I'm not 20 anymore. Come on. Okay, this is false. Okay, again, it has to do with when you say the only way to learn a second language. What do you mean by learning? You mean like becoming fluent and sounding like a native and what does that mean? Okay, for example, you can learn French and speak French really well and read and watch movies in French and never set foot in France. Okay, you don't have to go to France. Yes, there are some advantages in learning a language where the language is spoken, because you have access to resources. You have access to people that speak the language. Okay, you can join a club and speak the language. You can participate in the society. You learn more about the culture of the people. But you can still do a lot of those things at home without having to go to that country. You can learn a second language in a few months if you use the right methodology. You can learn a second language in a few months if you use the right methodology. Sounds like one of those things that professional language learners will tell you, or language channels on YouTube. I can teach you to be fluent in 5 months. Okay, what do you mean by learn? Learn a language. Okay, I can go to Wikipedia, look up a language, and maybe it'll take me, you know, an hour to read a long article about that language. Okay, fine, I learned the language, right? I can teach you to speak English in 10 days. You won't be able to do much with it, but you'll be able to say hello, say my name is, and you learned the language. Okay, now can you learn the language completely in a few months? Wait a minute, I'm still learning English. You know, whatever language is your native language, aren't you still learning it? Aren't you still, you know, learning vocabulary and figuring things out about the grammar? Nah. What do you mean by learn a language? Learning a second language improves certain brain functions, e.g., memory, cognitive function. Is that true or false? Learning a second language improves certain brain functions, e.g., memory and cognitive function. That is true. And actually, it's not just about learning a second language. It has to do with just learning anything. Okay, if you decide, oh, I'm gonna take up music. Okay, I want to learn how to play an instrument. As you're learning and as you get better and better, your brain starts changing. You know, you're making connections in your brain to learn that. In the case of language learning, there are studies that show that you improve certain types of memory because you have to remember vocabulary and grammar rules. You're exercising your brain, essentially, and your memory, and also some cognitive functions. We don't have time to go deeply into that, but trust me, yes. And actually, some people say that people that learn languages, it's not that you become immune to conditions such as Alzheimer's. You might still develop it, you know, if you have the genetics for it, but it comes later. Okay, you delay certain types of neurological problems. Okay, so actually, they even say, no, people who read a lot, people who do crossword puzzles, people who solve puzzles, they keep their brains active. And one way to keep your brain active is to learn second language. Learning grammar holds you back. You should just have as much exposure to your target language as possible. Don't waste too much time learning grammar. Learning grammar holds you back. You should just have as much exposure to your target language as possible. Watch a lot of movies, read a lot, talk to people, forget the grammar. That's false. Now, obsessing over grammar, as I mentioned before, obsessing over grammar, it's all over YouTube. Obsessing over grammar is not productive, right? Obsessing over anything, okay? If you start obsessing over things, it will hold you back. You know, some people are so worried about their grammar, they don't want to make mistakes. They can't even open their mouths because, you know, they keep thinking about the grammar. But if you have a lot of exposure to a language, it doesn't mean that you're going to learn it. Okay, it's more complicated than that. You can go live in a country where, you know, they speak a different language. You can live there your whole life and learn very, very little. Okay, you have to make a conscious choice to learn that language. You have to engage. You have to get in there. And as an adult, and you're learning the language, you will start thinking about the grammar. Okay, I think it's really, really difficult for an adult to start learning a language and not start thinking, oh, okay, so you put the verb here. Okay, because you're an adult and you have the ability to think about language. Okay, children don't have that. That's called a metacognitive skill. Okay, children have a hard time thinking about language, using language to think about the language. Okay, they just speak, they just learn. But you're not kids anymore. You're an adult. You can think about grammar. But it's about finding the balance between getting obsessed over grammar or just, you know, learn grammar. Just look at it and it's beautiful and you learn rules and you're still going to make mistakes. And yes, the more exposure you have, the better, because you're practicing listening and you're hopefully, you know, speaking as well. There is a difference between learning and acquiring a language. Is that different? Learning a language and acquiring a language. That is true. Okay, these are different processes. I've seen videos on YouTube with people talking about don't just learn a language, acquire the language. It's a kind of a subtle difference, but essentially you can learn a language, which would be like the difference between learning about a language. So you can know a lot about the language because you learned the language. But to acquire the language means that that language becomes part of how you think. You can actually feel the language, so you've acquired the language. Okay, children don't learn the language, they acquire the language. They start learning the language when they go to school. Okay, then they start thinking about language and being taught about the language. They just acquire it, they just absorb it. Okay, it's a small difference, but if you hear somebody talk about that, they're telling the truth. Reading is the best way to learn vocabulary. You should never use vocabulary lists, as in memorizing vocabulary lists. So don't memorize vocabulary lists. Reading is the best way to learn vocabulary. Reading, vocabulary lists, memorization. Yes, no, maybe. What? It depends. Okay, is reading the best way to learn vocabulary? I tell my students to read, okay, to improve their vocabulary. If they say, "Oh, how do I improve my vocabulary?" I'll tell them, read a lot. But I tell them to read a lot because it's about, as you read, you're looking at new vocabulary, you're looking at the grammar of the language, you're absorbing, the language. Your brain you're forcing your brain to think about what you're reading and so forth. Okay, so that is true, but you can also use reading to learn vocabulary and quit because you're not reading the right things. Okay, if you're at a basic level and you say, "Oh, I'm gonna read," the New York Times. Let's say you're learning English, you're at a basic level, and say, "Oh, my teacher told me to read, so I'm going to read the New York Times." You're going to give up. You're going to go, forget it. I'm never going to learn English because it's way above your level. Okay, even native speakers have a hard time reading certain passages because they're too difficult. The language is too specific, and there's just too much, and even the grammar and so forth. Okay, so it's reading the best way. Yes, if you do it the right way, if you go about it the right way, read at your level or just above your level. Ask for help. Okay, if somebody says, "Oh, just read," but they don't explain how you can use reading effectively, well then, they're only giving you half the advice. Okay, read at your level or just above your level. Read to enjoy it. Don't stop every time you see a new word. "Oh, I'm going to stop and look it up." No. If you're going to read for the content first. Maybe underline a few new words that you keep seeing over and over, and then you can go back and study a little bit of vocabulary. Okay, but just reading, I don't know. It could help. Yes, no, maybe it will make you quit. Okay. As far as memorization, for a long time in language teaching, people would say that the worst way to learn anything is to memorize things. I disagree. I think sometimes you need to memorize things, to commit it to memory until it becomes automatic. Okay, if you just keep using the language, I'm not going to memorize anything ever because it's bad. I don't know why. Memorize it, get it over with, and then when you start speaking the language and listening and using the language, those lists will start coming back to you. If you hate memorizing things, don't. It's up to you. Native speakers make the best teachers of their own languages. Native speakers make the best teachers of their own languages. If you start reading the language learning literature, if you start going to YouTube and finding, language videos, you will see, native speakers, native speaker, native speaker, native speaker. Hey, Ellison says no, native speakers are not necessarily the best teachers, or they're not good teachers at all. That's one of those things that you see a lot, like in thumbnails on YouTube. Speak like a native speaker. Click, click, click. I need to click this because I want to sound like a native speaker. This is false. Or maybe that's one of the yes, no, maybe, depends. Okay? Not necessarily. That's right. Not necessarily. If you have a native speaker who has not really thought too much about the language, people who know how to teach are the best teachers. Native doesn't mean you know how to teach. Thank you, Perp. Thank you. Thank you. Exactly. You can have a native speaker who speaks the language. Actually, I had an experience some time back, with other language teachers. There was this guy who, he had a degree in English. He was from the United States, and a student asked about the present perfect tense or something, and he couldn't explain it. He had no idea how to explain it. He couldn't even understand the question. He had no idea why the student was asking that question, okay? Because, he was a native speaker. He had never stopped to think about it. And for him, it was like, yeah, it makes total sense. So he kept explaining by repeating the same thing. Like, I have bought a car. I have seen my friend. I have eaten the cake. And the student was like, yeah, what does that mean? So if you have if you're at an advanced level and you want to learn about the culture, and you want to learn, pronunciation and things like that, yeah, maybe you would want a native speaker. For example, if you want to improve your pronunciation, you might want a native speaker, or someone who's not a native speaker but has like really, really good pronunciation. Okay. But especially at the beginning and intermediate level, not necessarily. I'm not saying native speakers are always bad teachers, but they're not necessarily good teachers. Not necessarily. And as Perk said, do you know how to teach? Okay. Wait a minute. Oh, yeah. So learning a new language can change how you understand and use your native language. Learning a new language can change how you understand and use your native language. That is true. Okay, when you learn, it's kind of interesting when you start learning. Yeah, Ellison, first-hand experience, right? When you start learning a second language, you start thinking about your language, like, oh, interesting. In this language, yeah, and Perk agrees. Okay, in this language, you say it this way, but in my language, oh, interesting. I hadn't realized that, which is kind of neat. And sometimes, you learn a second language and your native language improves. Don't speak your target language until, rush through this. I notice, the time now. Don't speak your target language until you know enough vocabulary and grammar. Otherwise, you'll reinforce mistakes. Don't speak the target language. So if you're learning German, wait to start speaking until you have enough grammar and vocabulary. Otherwise, you start, saying everything wrong, and those mistakes will be with you. Perk thinks that's false. Yeah, believe it or not, I have heard, oh, no way. make mistakes, damn it. I heard that a few times. There is some method, I don't even think it's a method, where you're supposed to just listen, and learn as much as possible before you start speaking. And I haven't seen any research to support that at all. I don't know what people are basing that on. I know, but I don't want to get into it. It's some stuff that's not research based. It's not easy for an English learner to distinguish between native speaker and so I want a teacher who's a native speaker, but you can't even tell the difference, especially when you're first learning the language. That's quite true. Is it Masne Butchek? Okay, it's more difficult to learn something. Let me skip this. Okay, this one is good. Okay, you can spend the rest of your life learning a language. You can spend the rest of your life learning a language. That shouldn't be a hard one, right? Because, no, you guys are young. I forget that you're young. So if you're very young in the audience, are you going to spend the rest of your life learning your target language? True. Okay, Allison, I don't mean to motivate you. I don't want Allison to go, I don't want to spend the rest of my life learning a language. That is true. Autopilot, that's true. Yeah, you spend the rest of your life learning your mother language, right? If you want, you can continue. Katie says, sure, keep learning. Keep learning your own language. Keep improving your vocabulary. Reading, learning something about grammar that maybe you didn't know. In my grammar videos on the channel, every now and again I get a comment from someone saying, "Oh my God, I had no idea that this is how this worked," or I knew this, but I didn't know why." So they're, and they're older people. They're not like teenagers. Teenagers don't watch my channel. They do. Some of them do. Let's skip this. Okay, so, all right. So we saw that there's a lot of crap out there. So what is the best way to learn a language? So keep those in mind. Remember, you have your motivation, you have attitudes, and you have specific language learning goals, right? Keep those in mind. So whatever I say here, it has to go through that filter. What is my motivation to learn? What attitudes do I have? What are my goals? My fresh goals that I just set because of the live streams. Okay. Choosing your own materials. Okay, choosing your own materials. So when you choose your own materials, you should balance between instructional and genuine activities. So let's say you're learning on your own and you're looking through some materials, or you go to the library, or go to a bookstore and you want to buy some language book. Is it instructional? Is it learn English, or is it just a novel, a short story? Try to find some balance between those. There are really good textbooks that will have both. For example, they'll have an article, and it's a real article. It's not an article for people who are learning the language. They have an article there. Some even have like videos that it comes with the material, and the videos are not like, "Hello, you are going to learn German now," and they speak very slowly. No, it's an actual TV show or broadcast or news or something in that language. And then there's a section that has the instruction and a vocabulary list, maybe a grammar explanation or something. So there's a balance there. Okay, so if it's all fun and games, you also have to do some instruction, okay? So look at your materials and ask yourself, am I focusing too much on instructional materials, or am I also looking at how the language is used? Okay, get online, get on YouTube, look for real life stuff, real life stuff. If you're learning Spanish, watch some telenovelas. Okay, they're fun. They cry and there's a lot of drama, and you get to hear Spanish as it's spoken, well, in telenovelas at least. Find a sweet spot of materials that are at your level or just above. Okay, as I was talking about before, when it comes to reading, if you're reading something that's really, really difficult, you will not want to keep reading. Okay, you might even abandon the language because you kept trying to read and you were so frustrated that you said, I give up. But also, if you pick materials that are too easy, it gets boring after a while. So try to find the right amount of challenge, but also the right amount that will give you enough comprehension. Use content that interests you first, and use content that you already know something about first. What I mean by this is that it's easier for you to read something that you're interested in and something that you already know something about. Okay, so I might say, I'm learning a new language and I want to read an article or a textbook about science, or let's say about astronomy or biology. Okay. Oh, no. Astronomy is too difficult in a different language. No, but wait a minute. I already know a lot about astronomy. I love astronomy. Probably it won't be that hard. Now, if you know nothing about astronomy, it'll probably be very hard. Okay. Oh, I love cooking. Well, then read cookbooks. Okay. Read stuff about cooking first. At some point, you may want to start getting into, things that you may not know that much about, just for fun, and also for variety. Ellison says, when I started to learn English, I could take real life materials that had the translations and explanations. Yeah, it helps. If that is something that you enjoy doing, you should do it. But remember, don't focus too much only on instruction. Just get a variety of materials. Choose genuine materials. You're not learning the language to understand the language in textbooks. You're learning the language because you want to be able to use the language, read, novels and the news, talk to real people that speak the language whenever possible, and things like that. If that's your goal. If you have no intention whatsoever, I want to learn English only because of, I'm an engineer and I have to read a lot about engineering in English. Okay, forget everything else. Don't read novels. Don't read the news. Just focus on learning that. Okay? Again, remember, keep that in mind. What are your goals? Okay, you know what I'm saying. All right. Also, evaluate your courses and instructors. Okay? If you're not just learning on your own and finding your own materials, sometimes you don't have the choice. Okay, you go take a course, you go to college and you take a language course, or you join a language school just to learn that language. Okay, I don't have a choice. It's whatever they tell me to do, that's what I do. Well, but you have a brain, you can use it, and you can ask about the methodology. If you have a new instructor, especially like if you're paying like a private tutor or something, ask them about their instructional philosophy. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Ask them, what's your instructional philosophy? How do you like to teach? What is your method? Okay, and just pay attention and listen to them. Okay, if they start giving you a lot of those myths, I'm going to make you learn the way a child learns, run. Just run. Because they don't know what they're talking about. And remember, you can be a native speaker You can, have years of experience teaching. It doesn't mean that you're a good teacher. Beware of miraculous promises. Again, if someone says, I'll teach you English in 3 months, forget it. It's not going to happen. They just want your money. Or, they want you to buy their course or something. And make sure they meet your motives and personal goals. Okay? So don't go take a course and pay and have to go and buy materials and invest time if that's not what you want. My goal is to learn this language for this purpose, but this course, unless that's the only thing available in town, yuck. I don't know. I don't know what I would do in that case. Okay, maybe I would start learning on my own. I don't know. But if it doesn't meet your motives and your personal goals, you get into those pitfalls, right? So again, this is about you using your brain and saying, okay, what is the methodology? What are they trying to teach me? How are they trying to teach me? Okay. And there are some red flags that I would advise you to pay attention to. Okay. Some red flags. I love this picture too. She's like, what? What are you saying here? Some red flags are instructional rigidity. Okay. An instructor that says, this is how you have to do it, and this is how we're going to do it. And you don't see them adapt their teaching to what students need at the time. Okay, they believe in something. Oh, we have to do it this way because this is the best way. That's a red flag for me. People that are teaching based on fads. Oh, lately everybody is doing this, blah 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 methodology, and this is what I do because everybody is doing it. Why are you doing it? So go back to why are you doing it? How does it work? Ask questions, okay? And when you see what I call clickbait, and deal offers, people offering, effortless solutions, okay? I'll help you learn whatever, and you won't have to do anything. What? I'm the one doing the learning. Okay, so it's not about you doing things so that I learn. That's not how it works. For me to learn something, I need to do the work. Okay, and a lot of times, like you see that, clickbait videos. You see a thumbnail, and they say, one trick to learn English immediately. And when you click, they tell you, yeah, spend 20 hours a day doing this and this and that. Master Chinese in 20 seconds while you sleep. Yeah, it's possible. It's now, we've talked about all this stuff in the last 4 weeks. And hopefully, my hope is that I got you guys to my hope is that one day I will know how to set all this up. I apologize again. Okay, my hope, if anything, out of these the last 4 sessions, is that I got you to think and to question and to look at yourself, look at your behavior, and think, ooh, maybe there's a better way. Maybe I'm not doing it, in the most effective way. Or maybe you thought, hey, everything that I learned in these live streams just reinforced the fact that I'm doing great. If that's what it is, at least you put some thinking into it. You're doing the right thing. Okay, so at least I hope that I got some ideas for you to think about. Okay, now you're here, you're investing time coming to these live streams, participating. Hi, Evandro. Evandro, where were you? You just said hello now. We're almost done. So what do you do now? Well, now you get out there. Now that you thought about these things, hopefully you have some better tools to evaluate where you are, to what do you do when you feel stuck in the same place? Okay, Jose, go back, watch all four live streams that I did, including this one, okay, and examine your behavior. Examine what is it that I'm doing? Do I have the right motives? Do I have the right attitudes? What is my goal? I'm stuck. So where do I want to go to feel unstuck? What do I need to do? Okay, take small steps, make realistic adjustments to your old goals, or maybe throw them all out and come up with totally new, realistic goals. Okay, and don't have expectations that you can change everything and everything's going to be wonderful just because you're doing something different. It may take some time. Oh, hello from the U.S., Evandro from Brazil. Welcome. So now that you know all the stuff, keep thinking about these things. Hopefully you'll be able to make some adjustments, make some new goals, get unstuck, and show up for the first live stream in this series where we're actually, now that you know all that stuff, we're going to start talking about, okay, now what about the listening? What about reading? What about pronunciation? What Jose said, what do I do when I feel stuck? We'll be covering different skills. I separated them into skills. Otherwise, there's so much to talk about. So we're going to look at separate skills, even though, you learn everything at the same time. So listening skills. So what do you do to improve your listening skills? I'm stuck. I keep listening. I keep watching videos and movies, and I don't seem to improve. Well, we'll talk about, what you can do to perhaps do something different to improve your listening skills, what not to do. It's very easy for people to make mistakes and think, they're doing great. What they're doing, they're working really hard, but maybe, their expectations are off and so forth. So we'll talk about improving your listening, your pronunciation. Actually, when we talk about pronunciation, I have a guest, somebody who works with, teaching pronunciation. We'll talk about grammar, reading, writing, I don't remember, and so forth. Okay? All right, if there is anything else, sempre tem brasileiro. Brazil! All right. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Roxana Chavez, thank you so much for the super chat. Actually, you guys, you have time if you want to send me a super chat. I have to pay the light bills and all that stuff. I really appreciate it. And please take some time to take a look at the membership. All you have to do is click join on the channel, and you'll see, what perks we have. I'm really excited that people are starting to join the channel, and the more people join, the more excited I'll get, and the more I'll be able to offer. Don't forget, I have a website where I'm still working on it, and probably I'll keep working on it for the rest of my life, adding materials to it. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Like Sylvia, I don't know if Sylvia is still in the room. I met Sylvia through Instagram. It's really cool that, it's such a big world. You guys are like in all sorts of time zones. You have people that are already like tomorrow almost. And I get to talk to you. You get to listen to me. I get to chat with you guys online. I just love that. Look into joining the channel. If you don't want to join, one way to make a one-time contribution is through super chat during live streams. Also on Venmo at Snap Language and things like that. Madrid. Perk, you're in Madrid. Cool. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And see you next week when we talk about improving your listening skills. In any language, not just English, in any language. All right, take care. Bye.